All right, welcome everybody to episode number 22 of Along the Way. My name is David.
I'm TJ.
And we're filming live here on location from the city of Rome.
That's right.
Spare no expense in our budget here for our podcast. Now, we are filming this during the week of VBS here at the Grove. We just finished up our last night of the full program, getting ready for our closing program tonight.
Man.
How you feeling?
It's been good. Honestly, VBS is one of those things that's a week long. It's very exhausting and tiring. We expend a lot of resources and manpower, but I've never got to the end of a VBS week and thought that wasn't amazing.
Yeah, we always have a lot of fun, and it's for all the years that I've been here, our church has just always rallied around VBS. Everybody, not everyone, but a large percentage of our people participate in some capacity. We certainly know people are praying for it, but giving donations, being here for the decoration, which we had tons of people here last week to help decorate. And then, of course, all of our crew leaders, our family leaders has come this year with our theme. And some of them have some fun groups to lead.
Oh, yeah.
So they have earned their stripes this week. But I was actually thinking with this particular topic we're going to hit today, which is all about grit. I'm not so sure it would have been appropriate for us to film that after the United States performance in their last soccer.
No, that was terrible, man.
I would have felt a little bit hypocritical talking about grit after watching that. But anyway, the wounds are still fresh. I think I'm still healing up. I don't know about you, but I guess as every other team gets knocked out, I'm like, yeah, well, at least other people are sharing our grief around the world. So only one team ends up happy, I guess, at the end of the tournament. But yeah, so our theme today is, as we've been continuing to use Mark Moore's book, Core 52, as sort of a resource to give us some guidance. We've been trying to pair certain chapters with certain themes of the sermon series we've been doing. And our chapter today is titled Gaining Grit. Which grit has a lot of different connotations here in the South. We're not talking about what we consume for breakfast, but we're talking about that attitude that people have. When you say someone has grit, it's that's you're sticking to it, which is a lot like our grits here. They stick to you when you eat them, but that you're not giving up, you're not quitting, you're going to persevere. And so I thought a good question to kind of get us started today is, throughout the course of life, there's some things that are hard for us, physically hard, physically demanding. So what's something like that you've done before, or maybe what's something that's kind of on your list of things that you want to challenge yourself with one day?
Yeah, so mine, and I would say I've done this and I want to do it again in the future, is a race called the Tough Mudder. And it's one of those obstacle course races where the very first, it's freezing cold. It was like December or January. First obstacle is belly crawl under barbed wire through a mud hole. And so you're freezing from the beginning. And there's like a wall that you have to run up, but you can't run up this wall yourself. So there's other groups. You do it with a group of people, but there's other groups already on top of the wall, and they're there to help you up. And so they help you up. You turn around, you help the next group up. And one of my favorite stories, I'll try to find the picture and put it up on the screen right here, is my friend Daniel did it with us. And Daniel, he's not shy about it. He's a big guy. And the last obstacle, he wanted to go around it and not do it. Basically, you're belly deep in mud, water, and above you are these big rollers, and you have to get up onto the roller and roll over it into the thing. And he wasn't getting it, he wanted to quit, and we're all like, "You got this, Daniel! We're not going on." And the moment he got up, got on it, and got over, and as a team, that celebration.
Oh yeah,
man, that's a moment I'll never forget.
That's cool. That is really cool. Yeah, I've never done any of those like the Spartan races or the Mudder races or whatever, but they do look like a lot of fun. I'm guessing that whatever shoes you wear for that event, they're done after that.
Oh, straight to the trash. They have recycling bins there for you to throw them away.
So, but yeah, that looks like a lot of fun. And when I started thinking about that question too, I played soccer in college, and I played positions where I was just running the whole game, and so I would push myself pretty hard to get ready for that. But I got out of running for many years when I didn't have a reason to run, or at least I didn't think I had a reason to run. And so I think getting started back running in my early 30s and getting consistent with that, the first 10K race that I did, training for that. I haven't registered yet, but a guy here in the church, Zach Dangerfield, has been running quite a bit, and Zach's been registering for all kinds of races, and he had talked about maybe doing a marathon or a half marathon. I was like, well, I have thought about possibly trying a half marathon. So there's one coming up in September, and so I've laid out a training plan for myself to try to be ready for that.
Wow.
So that'll be the longest race that I've ever done. So and I'm starting this training plan in the miserable heat.
Dude.
I ran today actually early this morning, and I thought I actually got out early enough to avoid some of the. Oh my goodness, it was just nasty and sticky.
It's
and
awful.
Humid and. But anyway, so hopefully I'm going to keep pushing myself now that
awesome.
I'm 51 trying to do all this. But anyway, so I think the idea of running, whether it be the Tough Mudder or being on doing some kind of long, lengthy kind of road race, there's a reason why those are used as good analogies often in the scriptures, particularly by Paul. We're going to talk about a good bit today for this idea of grit, because no matter what sort of athlete or runner you might think you are, or walker, when you do your first event, or if you're trying to train for like a couch to 5K thing, whatever that first day is, you get out there off the couch, you probably feel like you're going to die. Oh, yeah. you want to quit, you want to give up. But that's the whole concept of what grit is. And as we get into the conversation today, I appreciate there's a bit of a tweak that Mark makes. The question he asks is, how do we gain grit? But about halfway through the chapter, he says you can't, but you can train grit.
Yeah.
And I love that. So you want to read the scripture that comes to us today?
Yeah, so he starts with Hebrews chapter 12. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God.
And I'm going to tack on verse 3. I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but he's got verses 1 and 2 from Hebrews 12 in the book. But I think verse 3 also helps to bring about this point of grit and continuing on. It says, consider him, talking about Jesus, who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And those last few words in particular, not grow weary and lose heart, I feel like that is the epitome of what grit is. So when you hear the word grit, what are some ideas or images that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think about the people in my life that, like my grandfather, who served in the military, came back from Vietnam, and was just rock solid for the rest of his life as a leader for the family, a great man. We didn't go to church, so that's the only thing, points I would deduct from him. But he read his Bible every single day. He's been through some stuff, he's seen some stuff, he shared some of those stories with me. But he's just one of those people that always did the right thing, and at least in my mind. I think about my youth pastor, I always looked up to him as a dad and as a husband and as a pastor. And it's I think about where I am in life, and maybe I wish I made some better decisions. And I'm sure Mark maybe dealt with some of that stuff too, but, he's stuck with it. He hasn't taken the easy road. He's willing to go through the hard things because I guess he trained for it,
Yeah. The expression I've heard before when it comes to this idea of grit is you can't be defeated if you don't give up.
That's good.
And on a maybe more meaningful and more spiritual platform, I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and the person quoted Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa, however you refer to her, as once saying, the most important thing in life is not being successful. The most important thing in life is being faithful. And which I think speaks to the same sentiment. This idea that your grandfather, people in my life that I would mention, there might not be people that have a great deal of notoriety outside of their intimate circles.
Right.
They might not have achieved levels of success as our world might define it, but the reason that they have a legacy to leave behind, the reason that they are people of influence is because they were faithful. They didn't give up. They didn't quit. They didn't run out on their families. They didn't just not do their jobs well. They weren't unreliable employees. That stick-to-itiveness that is what grit is. So the word grit is not found in our English translations of the Bible, but there are many of its synonyms that are there. Words like perseverance, courage, bravery, endurance, determination. The Greek word for endurance that's there in Hebrews chapter 12 is hupomone, which literally translates as hyper stay. Not only am I going to stay, I'm going to be digging my claws in. Like, you
Right.
can't get rid of me. I'm not going anywhere. When we were working on the Gospel of John, some of the I am statements of Jesus a while back, and I think you preached a sermon on John 15, we talked about that word meno, which is translated as remain in me. It's the same word, but they've added the hypo on the front end of this idea that I'm going to abide, I'm going to dwell, I'm going to stick to it in a hyper sort of way, like in an extensive sort of way. And just that idea, like I'm digging in, and even if all I can do is just hold on, I'm going to keep holding on. And the examples of people that you've mentioned in your life, there's been many of those in my life as well. And I think the power of grit, not just for ourselves or for our own growth and development, is when we demonstrate that to others. Sometimes they've lost faith in themselves. And when we can continue to work and serve with that sort of determination and endurance, sometimes our grit is enough to keep others holding on. Like, maybe they've lost faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've lost that belief in themselves or in their circumstances or whatever, or maybe even their faith in the Lord. But when they can see that consistency in us, there's something that's what preaches to them. That's what encourages them.
Yeah, I like that. I'm on a weird side of TikTok right now where I think I see equal parts Christian content and equal parts like deconstructing Christianity parts. And I was reading through this chapter and I just kept thinking about how, like, it's so easy to think of this term grit and think, just like man up or like just deal with it, But I think people are so easy to go into this deconstruction mode because they haven't developed that grit. And I like the way that Mark uses this chapter as a way that maybe there's something that we can do for maybe newer believers or young believers to help them develop that, so that when things get crazy, they're not so easily like abandoning the faith.
Yeah, they're not dismayed, they're not discouraged, or they feel like there's still a way to go forward. And we picked this chapter to go along in this series we're doing of Old Testament wisdom right now, and we're in the latter part of the book of Ecclesiastes. It's kind of like a core set of scriptures we're digging through, because that's the theme there. It's Solomon, and who's we believe wrote these scriptures, compiled these scriptures later in life, looking back at a life not always well lived. I mean, right. Solomon had a great deal of wisdom and honored God in many ways, but he also dishonored God's best for his life. He made some poor choices, and so you get this kind of old, wizened man who's looking back and speaking to a younger generation and saying, life's going to be hard. Life's going to suck sometimes, and things are not going to go your way. Things are not going to be fair. And when those things happen, are you going to maintain poise? We talked about this past Sunday. Are you going to work to develop the grit that you need in that moment already? Have you trained grit, right, so that when things get tough, you're going to keep on keeping on? So early on in the chapter, he references a book called Grit by Angela Duckworth, which I actually read a couple years ago. And she's a good listen. She's on a couple different podcasts. She used to do a podcast called No Stupid Questions, which I loved. It doesn't run anymore, but the content is still available online. I don't know that Angela is a believer. I think she's Christian curious is the best way to describe it, I guess. I know her, but her husband is. Like, she talks about her husband Jason frequently in her podcast, and how he's pretty faithful. And I think they all go to church. I'm not sure where she is in her faith, but the book is a great read, and she profiles people. Some people you've heard of, like she profiles Pete Carroll, former coach of the Seahawks. Things went really well with the Seahawks, not so well with the Raiders in this most recent stint he had. But she talks about the way that he was able to lead their, I think they won two Super Bowls while he was their coach. And just like his spirit of grit that was just like a cultural part of the Seahawks identity while he was there. And the way grit was translated for him personally was in this the spirit of optimism that Mark talks about towards the end, this idea that I'm always going to believe that there's an answer. I'm going to always believe that there is a path forward. It may not be the easy path forward. It might even be a path we really want to take, but we're never without an option. Yeah. And that's the way, that it kind of comes across for him. There's some other sort of problematic people that she profiles, like Will Smith is also one of the examples that she gets. I think that was pre-slap at the Oscars. But also she profiles, and Mark mentions this in the chapter, Army Rangers, West Point students, spelling bee champs, teachers who are working in very underserved, impoverished communities who could easily go to other schools, but they don't. They stay and they stick.
Right.
They hyper stay. She uses all of them as examples of grit. And the findings that Mark mentions in the chapter that I think are really critical to point out is that some of those are celebrity names. People, you think, oh, they've had every break and they've got the money or whatever. But she said what she's found in all of her research is that it's really not dependent upon IQ or wealth or race or even your physical ability. There might be even better, more talented athletes who've not been as successful because they didn't have the grit to work at their craft and to get better and better. I don't know. So what did you, just some of those findings that he mentions, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I really appreciated that because this is a faith-based podcast. We're a church, right? We're talking about in the context of your faith and following Jesus. But this is so true and transcendent into every single area of your life. Like my grandmother used to say that, well, if it was easy, then everyone would do it. When I didn't want to go to tennis lessons or practice, or I didn't want to practice guitar. Well, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? And so I think it just speaks to like success, however you view success in your life or your area of expertise, whatever it may be, then you have to be able to develop some form of grit if you want to eventually be successful. Because sure, there are Nepo babies out there that everything is handed to them, but that is the exception and not the rule.
Yeah. So a couple words that I learned that I wrote down in my notes for today from that book that come to us from other cultures. And I think hopefully you're going to appreciate this. You guys know that I'm a word nerd. My Aunt Marie has pointed out when she watches our podcast that she likes when I teach her new words. So in addition to the main
word of the day is
our main word is grit. But one concept that Duckworth mentions in that book called grit is, and I think I'm pretty sure I've used this in a sermon before as well, but it's called Kaizen. It's a Japanese cultural term. And it's the concept of Kaizen is that you resist the temptation to plateau.
Oh, man.
You get to a place where things become easy because you've done it so far. And its literal translation in Japanese is continuous improvement. And it's the opposite of being complacent. It's not looking backwards with either dissatisfaction or that's good enough. It's always looking forward and always wanting to grow. Like there's still a better me that God sees that's still beyond where I'm at today. Anyway, I think that concept ties in really well with grit because none of our growth is in a continual straight line. A lot of our growth is much more like a roller coaster or is 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. But ultimately, that's still a net gain of 1 step. And so it's this idea that I'm going to hit setbacks. Many times it's going to be things that are beyond my control. But I got to keep showing up. I got to keep putting in the work and being consistent with the things that I know over time are going to help me to become the person that I need to be. And there's a lot of those disciplines we'll talk about in the rest of our conversation that Mark mentions in the chapter.
Yeah. So he says the two keys for gaining grit are from the passage in Hebrews. First, you look around to others you're responsible to and responsible for. And second, you look ahead to the reward you'll reap through perseverance. And obviously being a relatively new dad, only a couple years, me and my wife were talking the other day about something. I can't remember why I said this. I'm not going anywhere, but I made the comment to her that if I had to flip burgers at McDonald's, to put food on the table for my family,
sure,
that's what I would do. So thinking about being responsible for my family and to my family definitely has made me see that I'll do whatever it takes to protect them.
It's a sobering reality the first time you hold your own child.
Yeah. It's so amazing how people tell you that, and then you're like, that can't be. And then you hold them, and you're like, all right, brother, I would kill for you. You know?
But that mentality, of course, I'll do whatever it takes to provide for you. But also, he's gonna be watching me. I mean, just last night here at church, I don't know what it was about yesterday, man, but Brooks could not get enough of Daddy.
I know.
Didn't want to leave your side, and just that sense. And there will come a season where he's not going to want to have anything to do with you.
I know.
But just that idea that somebody, this little person, is always watching me, and that's certainly true about you as a dad. But even beyond our own kids, which is our primary responsibility, it's the other people in our lives that we have influence with. You
Right.
know, certainly as a pastor, a leader in a church, and if you're not in a position specifically, this idea that you are setting example. What I appreciate about that particular scripture is it also reminds us that we've been given examples. That cloud of witnesses. I get this image in my mind. Like I've run the Cooper River Bridge Run several times in the past, and I tell people all the time, I feel like that's the closest I've ever come to feeling like a professional athlete.
Okay.
Because I played college sports at our alma mater, Atlanta Christian College, and we get the people from the college would come and watch us. We never had huge crowds to watch us play soccer or baseball. But when you come off the bridge and you start running that last part of the race and through downtown Charleston, and you just got like mobs of people on both sides cheering. You got little kids sticking their hands out to give you a high five, like you're some big like you're Messi coming off the field or something. And it's just and just that idea of them just cheering you on. So when I think about that imagery, that I go back to the scripture here, that we're surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. As we're running the race of our life, we can look up in the stands and see the people who've gone before us. Now, he talks about specifically in Hebrews chapter 11, it comes right before this, the heroes of the faith, people like Moses and David and Abraham. But it's not, I don't think it's just them. It's the people that we actually physically knew.
For sure.
Your grandmother, your youth pastor, whether they're still with us or that they've gone on to be the Lord, that they're looking down or looking with us. And when somebody genuinely cares about you, someone in the faith genuinely cares about you, what they want for you more than anything else is for you to reach your fullest potential in Christ. Like whoever it is that you can be at your best, that's what they're cheering you on to become. And now that's an encouragement to me of like when you do get down or get discouraged or you run up against obstacles or hit walls, is to know that there are people in your corner in the stands cheering for you of like, no, get up, dust yourself off, keep moving, keep going forward.
Yeah, there's a temptation in ministry, I think, to plateau sometimes intentionally. And like we can settle into grooves and rhythms and be like, all right, this is my weekly to-do list. Let me like knock it out. But I have so many good people like and pastors in my life, including you as a leader, that like is always challenging me to do better, to get better, because we can always improve on every aspect. And so I think that is a temptation being in a pastoral role sometimes. The word you use, kaizen, like to not settle for complacency. I like that. I'm gonna use that.
Well, I'm gonna give you another Japanese illustration. This is also from the Duckworth book, but I guess there's an ancient Japanese parable story or whatever. It's called the parable of the bricklayer, and there's 3 different bricklayers, and the first guy says, basically says, I'm laying bricks. Like this is a job. I'm a bricklayer. I lay bricks. That's what I do. But the second bricklayer says no, because the job he'd been hired for was to build a church. And so he's like, no, this is I'm building. I've been hired not just to lay bricks, but I've been hired to build a church. And so that's like a second level of like it's not just a job, it's a career. Mm-hmm. This is what I do. I help build important buildings. But the third bricklayer says, I'm building the house of God. And so it goes from job to career to calling. And I think a lot of people view what we do as like, well, you guys have a specific calling because you're in this job of leading a church and being, but that is true for each and every one of us. I tell my wife, who's a school teacher, all the time, you are being faithful to the calling that God has put upon your life. God wired her to teach young children. Yeah. And she would be not being faithful to the gifts that she's been given, the passion, the heart she has, if she wasn't doing that. Mm-hmm. And so she's at her best, and she's being the best version of herself, when she is pouring her heart into a classroom full of students. So anyway, I love that idea of that parable, that story, because there are going to be days, even when you're doing it, when you're in the career that you feel is your calling, where it is going to feel like it's just a job. Yeah. Where you feel like I'm just laying bricks. It's just part. This is not the part I don't want to do. but that greater perspective of, no, these bricks that I'm laying are part of a larger calling that God's given me.
Yeah, my grandmother used to say, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I was like,
I don't know if that's true.
I don't know that, like, I love my job. But there are definitely days where I'm working.
There's days you're just laying bricks, man.
Absolutely. The second part was you look ahead at the reward you'll reap through perseverance. And it's so key because we live in that microwave society where it's my money and I want it now. And it's hard to, and he talks about this later in the chapter about, and Dave Ramsey talks about this a lot too, about the idea of delayed gratification.
Yeah. And this idea, and Paul, one of the many times he uses the road racing analogy throughout the scriptures, it's definitely the race of our lives is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if you take those first few, sometimes when I'll do road events and children are involved, man, they will take off out of the gate.
Oh yeah.
They're just so excited, so amped up. And then 30 yards away from the start line, they're like walking already, And I think many of us approach moments in life and seasons in life sometimes with that same immature mentality. We just busting out of the gate, and then when we start getting worn out or tired or worn down by circumstances, we can get easily discouraged and want to quit. And the idea that Jesus goes before us, that the scripture is about keeping your eyes fixed upon Jesus, the author, the perfecter, or the finisher of our faith, so how sometimes that word is translated, that Jesus goes before us as the pace setter, but he's also the finish line. He's the destination. He's who we're living for. And that it's by keeping our eyes on him, go back to verse 3, that we will not grow weary and not lose heart. Like, we're going to get tired, but it's by keeping our eyes on Jesus where we'll be encouraged to not quit. Like, he hasn't called me home yet.
Right.
He hasn't come back yet. So there's still a work he needs me to do.
Yeah, I love that Paul mentions about, like, he's, in one passage he references being whipped, being jailed, being shipwrecked multiple times. And every time I talk about that, I always say, like, if I'm shipwrecked once, I'm not getting on another ship, So that definitely speaks to his perseverance. But he himself, Paul, is points back to Jesus as an example of somebody to look to. But then Paul himself is an example of somebody to look to. So we can have that encouragement from them too, that they did never give up when the times got hard.
And so, I've had the privilege of playing Paul this week in our VBS right over there at Paul's house, and Paul's definitely one of, I think probably both of our heroes. I think any preacher looks to Paul as a hero of the faith for sure. When he was in that Roman prison writing letters, writing the book of Philippians, he talked about the idea, he was in chains, and his life had already been threatened many times. He had been beaten, left for dead, and he's like, if I die, I get to go be with Jesus. But if I don't die, then I keep living for Jesus. He's like, I'm really not sure which to wish for, because both are great, you know. Obviously, one's even better. But this idea that he realized that the timing of his death was ultimately not in his hands, and so even while he was in prison, he was still drawing breath. There was still good he could do for the kingdom. And so, he utilized that time. And part of the premise of our VBS this week is I had a guard with me the whole time, because in Philippians it says that even some in Caesar's household had accepted Christ. And the idea that Paul these guards were chained in for 6 hours at a time every single day. You get a literal captive audience to share the gospel with. And so, Brutus, my guard for the week, as I played Paul, the end of the week ends up accepting Christ. And the fact that, he's in prison, he's jailed up, and he's still being effective. So no matter what excuses we might come up with or reasons for why we can't be effective in whatever we're doing, there can be explanations for why we're in a season where we're being challenged, or we got to take a step back, or we need to rest, recover, be restored. Absolutely, those can all be true. But we're never in a season where it's okay for us to quit. Even when we are suffering at our worst, there is still a work that God is doing in us and through us. And to me, that's what grit is all about. So to kind of continue on that theme of the idea of training for grit, you already mentioned the first suggestion that Mark gives in the chapter of accepting delayed gratification. Yeah, I was kind of joking last night when we were cleaning up, but not really. With somebody was going around passing out the ice cream that Jennifer graciously provided for all of us as we cleaned up, but like they were passing it out before the cleanup was done. I'm like, man, you don't pass. You know, they got to get that. They got to earn that reward. Right. But we do live in that kind of culture where we want the ice cream first.
Yep.
And then maybe I'll work if I still feel like it afterwards, you know. And that's kind of, we got it backwards. When we were doing the guys in the church who were doing the Man Year program with me, that first module we did was a spiritual module, and it was, you know, daily time in the Word. We read the whole New Testament in that 12 weeks. We fasted 1 day a week, and some of the guys had a hard time, like, you know, because typically fasting is for a purpose. Like you've got a big decision, you're praying over it, or we might fast before we're preparing a certain series we're going to do. But they're like, why are we doing this? And I said, well, part of it's just to prove to yourself that you can. And it's like that I can do hard things. Or the men's hike that some of us have done before. You know, it's the idea that I can do hard things. I can put myself to the test and trust that God is going to honor that. And so, yeah, there's one of the most important things, and more, I guess, patterns or processes you can get in your life is learning to put the reward at the end of the struggle.
Right.
So step 2, I'm sorry.
No, jump to step 2.
Okay, step 2, he says, is recognize the consequences for not persevering or for quitting. I
think, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but you see circumstances that people might find themselves in. You know, everybody, like, you should want to strive to be the best version of yourself, right? And so, for me, you know, I look at my dad as a great example. Like, these are the consequences of like not being present with my child, or these are the consequences of making poor decisions with my health or my life. And so I'm not saying that should be your only motivation. I'm just saying, like, recognizing the consequences of not persevering in whatever arena that we're talking about.
Yeah. I don't see them quite as often as we used to, but there used to be a lot of like anti-smoking commercials that would air.
Yeah.
And there was that one in particular with the woman, she had like the little voice box.
Yep.
And I mean, smoking's never been an issue for me. I mean, and for people that might struggle with it, I mean, I've had people in my family that struggle with it for years and years and years. And I think there's certain generations where they didn't realize how dangerous it was. You know, I get all that. Mm-hmm. But man, when you watch a commercial like that, I'm like, why in the world would you even start, man?
Yeah.
If that's where you could end up. And when it's not your struggle, I think it's very easy to look at that and say, yeah, I mean, what's their deal? But then the things that I do struggle with, somebody else could look at that and say, what's your deal? Why do you keep walking down that same path over and over and over again? I remember years ago being in a leadership event, and the preacher that was one of the speakers, he said that years ago he'd gotten a friend of his who was like a graphic design artist to create like a front page of a newspaper for him. And on this front page of this newspaper were like, he brainstormed like, what would be the worst things that I could do that would blow up my marriage, blow up my family, you know, where I'd be leaving the church in disgrace, and like headlines of like all those, you know, like, you know, pastor indicted for embezzling funds from church, you know, pastor, you know, sleeps with the church secretary, just all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And he said I did that is to be like because those stories are real about other people, other mm-hmm. leaders. And he's like, I didn't want that to be true about me. And so that he said, I kept in my desk, you know, it was like this constant reminder of if I'm not staying in my lane, to use the running analogy again, if I'm not keeping my eyes fixed upon Jesus and running the race he's marked out for me, that could be me. That could be my story. So I think being aware, and some of the disciplines that Mark mentions that help keep us aware of the consequences are being in the Word. You know, these are not suggestions from the Lord. This is truth that we're given in the Bible. So not just reading it, studying it, which is what we've been trying to do this year with our sermon series, like learning how to study the Bible, but meditation and memorization. When you get in moments of crisis, that you know that you have truth that you can fall back upon, because it's just ingrained in you. I don't have the entire Bible memorized, but there's a lot of verses that I know by heart because I've gone over them many, many times. And, you know, like one of my favorites is 2 Corinthians 10:5, you know, to take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. And when I can feel myself spiraling, mm-hmm. That's when I try to bring back to mind. It's like, stop it. You know, you got to catch that now ask, is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Is it leading me to a place of life? So yeah, I appreciate that. Of like recognize if I'm not exercising grit, I don't stay in the race. Where does that path lead?
Right.
So
that's good.
Step 3.
Yep. Step 3: get over yourself. It's in the book.
I love it, man. He said the primary way we do that is?
Hold on, I'm trying to read back through it real quick.
Well, it's by serving. About the idea that you're considering the needs of others, like Paul wrote in Philippians chapter 2, consider the needs of others above yourself. So yeah, definitely when you serve with the right heart anyway, if you're serving looking for the thanks and the appreciation and the praise, then you're not getting over yourself. You're getting full of yourself. But the idea that we're serving well, but not even just serving. I appreciate that he said, that you become a better listener, that you learn how to slow down and be still, which is hard for, I think, both you and I to do. And it made me think about like getting back to that place where you realize that the world actually doesn't revolve around me. The job of Savior has already been taken. To me, that's a lot of what it means for me to get over myself.
For sure. I was looking for where he talked about the 3 circles. Was it not in that? I thought it was in that. Anyway, yeah, I think the whole thing about active listening, I'm trying to get better at that, especially like when my wife's talking to me, like not being like talking to her like while I'm scrolling, I don't think I'm always the best at that. And I think there's a certain side of our flesh that always wants, like I need a good attaboy every once in a while. But at the same time, keeping in mind that like it's not about me. It's not about me. Like what can I do to? One thing I love about our staff too is like none of us walk around like we're pastors on staff. We're too good to do anything, right? Like we've cleaned the bathrooms, we've taken the trash out, we've put the tables up and set them down, and so. Anyway, just so many opportunities for us to do that. But like honestly, like sometimes I'm not the best listener. Sometimes I'm not the best teammate, And so I think that's a good reminder for me. Hopefully Jennifer doesn't think that this week. I'm trying to be a good teammate for VBS.
Well, it's another cheesy line, probably on a bumper sticker somewhere. But the idea, like the best gift that you can give someone is your presence. Which is really cheesy. I know. I might have belonged in our dad joke. Really, did.
It's good. It's good.
But but the idea of being present with someone and where you're listening, you're being a whole body listener, and you're not shaking this person's hand, but thinking, I need to make sure I talk to that person over there because they're more important to me than you are right now, or when you are with somebody. And you got to be mindful of your time, and you got to maintain schedules. But like building enough margin into your days, into your life, where those moments when you're with somebody don't feel rushed and you're genuinely with them. Like that's one of the observations I think that came from Mark Moore in his Life of Christ class I went to a long time ago at CIY, where he talked about how one of the observations you make about Jesus is that he was an incredibly busy person, but he was never in a hurry.
Yeah,
like he was maximally available and present to whoever he was with. And the classic story of that is he's on his way to go heal Jairus' daughter, and the woman with the bleeding condition reaches and touches his cloak, and he's just like, whoa, we gotta stop. I just love that he can be so in the moment like that.
I'm glad you brought that up because I literally used that quote yesterday. I had lunch with someone, and I said, dude, thank you so much for having lunch with me. Like, I know your schedule's busy. He's like, no, dude, thank you for having lunch with me. Like, I know your schedule's busy. And I was like, my days are busy, but I said, I might be busy, but I don't want you to think I'm in a hurry. He's like, bro, that's good. I was like, I got it from David. Like, that's not my quote.
Well, I got it from Mark. So, and especially when you're in ministry, I mean, I know you see people say, I know you're busy, but when we're with people, that's part of the business.
Absolutely.
Is, we're in a people business. And I don't think that's just about people in ministry. I hear that a lot in people of a variety of industries. I mean, you might be if you're in sales, so much about sales is relationships, and it's just spending time with people and getting to know them and get to know their story. So, all right. So step 4, he said in training for grit, is to be accountable. Gritty people don't do life alone.
And I think one thing I love about what we do here at the Grove is like push people to this idea of a huddle, which is 2, 3 to 4 same-sex people that get together at a predetermined time to like ask those hard questions with each other, to navigate those like life circumstances together, because you can get so much more like growth out of that than you can what we call like growth groups or small groups, where it's like 15 to 20 people.
Yeah, I try to be gracious with people when they say things like, well, I don't need to be at church to grow in my faith. I don't need to be at church to grow as a Christian. I feel like I'm becoming a lot more direct though the older I get. When I hear that from people, I'm like, you don't get to decide that. I mean,
Right.
You didn't design faith. You didn't design yourself or your life. That's not the way it works. That's just not. You don't get to be in a relationship with God on your own terms. And God has wired us and designed us to need relationship with Him, but to also thrive in relationship with each other. So we don't get to choose the way we want to do it, and so we have to be engaged in community. And I like that when he says gritty people don't do life alone, we think about this idea of grit, like I'm going to hold on, I'm going to dig in. But I know but the reason I know I can do that is because I've got others who are holding on and digging in with me.
Right.
I'm not doing it on my own. And then the last suggestion he makes for training grit is, and I mentioned this earlier, was to cultivate optimism. To believe, for me, what that means is to believe the best about yourself, not naively. Not to, a scripture that I come back to frequently is when Jesus sent the disciples off on a preaching tour, and he says, "You be as innocent as doves, but also as shrewd as snakes." Like, you do everything with the right motives, but no, everybody doesn't think and act that way.
Right.
And so be discerning, be wise. But generally, but believe the best give people an opportunity. Even if they've made mistakes, give them an opportunity for to repent and to improve. But believe the best about yourself, about others, and to believe the best about the circumstances. That no matter how hard it is, there are options. There might be a lot of bad options, but there's still options.
Yeah, I think we're both optimistic, like by nature. And one thing that I've learned from you is like believing the best in someone in a situation, like not just assuming the worst in someone because they've like blown up on you, or because like we don't know what they've experienced that day.
Yep.
And so I think that's something to take into any conversation or any circumstance for sure.
And part of, I think, this idea of grit, there's an old story I heard told about Vince Lombardi, the legendary coach of the Green Bay Packers. He talked about his father had tattoos on his hands, and this one said work, W-O-R-K, and this one said P-L-A-Y. And it's that idea that Vince learned from his dad is that you work hard so you can play hard.
Okay.
The idea that that part of being a gritty person is finding joy and having fun. In fact, this emotional module that we're going through right now with the Man Year program, one of the challenges that I have not done a good job of this summer is you're supposed to like find something that's fun to do and have a day every week that you go do something fun. And I've done a lot of fun things this summer, but like just being very intentional about that is something that I want to get more consistent with. You mentioned earlier in the conversation that Mark spends time not just talking about how we develop and train for grit ourselves, but how do we help build that into others that we have influence with. And so I think it'd be good for us to mention some of those suggestions here towards the end of our conversation. He says, first of all, especially, I think a lot of this comes from being a parent, especially, set and communicate high expectations.
Yeah, I think frustrations come, especially in like any kind of relationship or work environment, when expectations aren't communicated, and then you expected someone to fulfill something, but it was never communicated to them, so how do they know, right?
Yeah.
Let's avoid that. Let's just communicate our high expectations from the get-go.
Yeah, if you have an expectation that goes uncommunicated and it goes unmet, that's on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Not on the other person. Yeah. Number two is to provide clear structure and boundaries. Boundaries is a term and a word and a concept that has so much value for our lives in so many areas. But to me, it's the idea that we all recognize we have limits, and I can't be everything and I can't do everything. But the things that God has called me to do or give me an opportunity to do, I can choose to give those things my very best. And again, that definition of a full life is not that it's been successful, but that I've been faithful. I'm responsible for my obedience. The Lord's responsible for the outcomes. The third one is to increase responsibility over time. So especially when you're working with young kids, I'm sure that you don't expect Brooks to have his bed made every day.
Not yet,
right?
no.
You know?
I mean, we're working on it. His crib he needs to make. I mean, I'm thinking about like even this week at VBS, I've had the opportunity to work with one of our teenagers, and he's really interested in working in the tech booth.
Yeah.
And so the first couple nights at VBS, I was like, all right, watch me do it. And then towards the end of the second night, I was like, all right, dude, I'm gonna watch you do it. And now last night, he just did it. You know?
And I think when you're training or mentoring somebody, whether it's your child or somebody younger than you in any capacity, it's the idea that letting them see that you struggle too is important, because that's the idea. That's where they can see the grit develop. Like, yeah, things are not always going to go the way you want them to, but when they don't, you got to adapt, and you got to figure it out. And so I think letting them see you struggle. I think one of the worst things you can do is whether it's intentional or unintentional, is to paint a picture like, yeah, I've got all my stuff together. I never have any issues. I'm always well planned and thought out, because you're creating this standard that honestly you're not really meeting anyway.
Right.
But you're building up this sense of this other person, like, well, I guess failure is just not an option, and that's a horrible environment to learn, and to think that you can never fail. The fourth thing he says is demand that your disciples respect their peers, that you speak well of others. I'm finishing up reading through Proverbs right now, my Bible reading plan, and there's so much in there about the power of our tongue and how dangerous gossip is. And so speaking well of others, he mentions specifically like being on time is a gritty habit, because when you're not on time and you're not prepared, that ends up putting burdens on other people, and that's not fair to them. And then the last one, show you care.
Yeah, I mean, I hope, like, that's something I hope I get right, like that I do care about the people that God has like placed under me or around me, and I think that's gonna speak volumes to them. Like I've talked about this in student ministry a lot. Like my youth pastor, I couldn't tell you a sermon that he preached. I couldn't tell you a couple songs that we did at Spring Road, but like I don't know what he preached on that night that I gave my life to Jesus, but I can tell you about all the times I showed up to his house. Yeah. And he didn't have to hang out with me. He hung out with me because he cared about me, not because he had to, Yeah.
The character, as much as we would like to believe that our people are just absorbing every single word that we say in a message. Right. And I know, you guys take really good notes, and I know you're following up. However, what makes a difference over a lifetime is the example that somebody has set for you.
Absolutely.
And that's very true. Well, do you have anything else? I got one more thing to close up with. So I'm going to teach you all one more word today. So this is also something that I learned when I read that book by Angela Duckworth called Grit. And she was talking about, we all talked about Japan. She talked about the culture of Finland. And this is something she learned about the Finnish identity or culture. A typical Finn is an obstinate sort of fellow who believes in getting the better of bad fortune by proving that he can stand even worse. And the word that the Finnish culture has for this is, I think, and I hope I pronounced it correct, but it's called sisu, S-I-S-U. And it's a combination of bravado and bravery, ferocity and tenacity, the ability to keep fighting when most others have quit, fighting with the will to win. And I think there's a definite extreme you can go to with that. Sometimes people don't accept help, or they're not willing to be honest with their own brokenness because they're like, I can do it on my own. So you definitely can carry that mentality, I think, to an unhealthy extreme. But I do think there's something to learn from that mentality as well. Of we all have more strength in us than what we think. And the scripture I would pair this with would be actually in Philippians chapter 2, when Paul encourages the Christians there to continue to work out their faith with fear and trembling. And the word work out there in the original Greek literally means to work out, to exercise it. And that idea with fear and trembling, like even when we're afraid, when we're not certain, that you keep exercising your faith. You keep trusting that God's called me to this, and so he's going to equip me with what I need. And then the next verse it says, because it is God who works with you and in you to bring about his goodwill. And so the idea that God is partnering with us, and so if you're practicing Zaisu on your own, you are going to tap out, or even if you think you've got more, we all come to places where we've got nothing less to give. And so the greater truth to hold on to is I can life will frequently throw things at me that are too big for me to handle, but there is nothing that is going to be that will overwhelm me or overcome me as long as I know that God is in it with me and that I'm trusting in Him. And I think that's where our ultimate source of grit comes from.
Amen. That's good.
Thank you guys for joining us. It has been an awesome week here at VBS, and we're looking forward to more weeks sharing with you here on the podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below in that section, and we'll try to our best to follow up with those and answer any questions you might have. And until next time, take care.